Okay, the bars we're going to install on this bike are 0 up and 2 inches back. Works good for guys with shorter arms or shorter guys that don't want that up. They just want more comfortable and get their arms back. These are the bars you would use. Again, 0 up and 2 inches back. We also offer 1 up and 2 back and 2 up and 2 back for taller guys. So the one thing you'll see, our bars are powder coated. One thing you may have to do is out on the ends, you want to trial fit this first on your controls. You may have to sand off some of that powder coat. We put it on pretty thick when we do the powder coating to protect the bars and make them a little less scratch resilient so they don't scratch as easy, but it does make it thicker, so you might want to trial fit these on the end and make sure. If you have to sand some down, go ahead and sand it down so those controls slide on there. So what you're going to want to do first is I just slide the controls on. Just take that and slide that on. And sometimes it helps if you have a second hand again to help line this up. So slide that stuff on where it needs to be. Now the one thing you notice with our bars is this gap right here is virtually, you can't see it. A lot of guys put the weld right there and it moves this control out. You know, I don't want to exaggerate it, but it moves it out like that and you have a big gap there. Ours are machine tight, so when that goes on, you can put this clutch brake perch right nice and tight, so it looks really good when you slide that on. So that's kind of the one trick. Slide that on, then that way you don't have to take this whole housing apart. Everything will just go right on. You want to kind of get it in place. And again, with a helper, it's easy. Watch your wiring. You don't want to pinch any wiring. And try to get that moved down in there as best you can. Now on this side, on the clutch side, you want to take the piece off the bottom of that so it goes on. It's a little bit harder to reach with everything together. So you just want to kind of move these bars to where you can get them to where this will go on. It'll slide on. It'll work. It's just really, really hard to do without a helper. But there, you can see it'll slide on. And again, it just makes it so you don't have to tear everything apart. Now, one thing I'll show you while we're in here is if you look down in here, this is the top of the triple tree right here on each side. You see this bolt right here. That bolt, for you guys that want to lower the front of your bikes down, all you need to do is loosen that bolt and then loosen the bolts on the bottom on the triple tree by the fender. Do the same thing on the other side. Loosen those bolts up, push the bike down, and really it kind of goes down by itself. And this fork tube will slide up. Now you can only go so far and it hits the handlebars. So what they do is you can put a spacer kit under here. You can get some thick 1-inch washers, 3/4-inch washers, spacer, whatever you want to do. And you just put them under here because what happens when this fork tube comes up, it hits the bottom of the handlebar. So you need to raise the handlebar up the same distance you raise this up. So if you raise this 1 inch, you need to put a 1-inch spacer underneath the handlebar. That will lower the front of the bike 1 inch. So that's just a little tip to show you how guys are lowering the front of their Visions. Doesn't cost you any money. You may need to use a longer bolt, shorter bolt. You know, once you do that, you have to figure it out. You would need actually a longer bolt. If you raise the handlebars up, you need a longer bolt. But you can do that real easy and play around and get a look you like. You know, some guys might want a 1/2 inch, other guys like 1 inch. You just really got to pay attention to what hits, and when you turn, make sure nothing's hitting. So once you get that all done, you want to just, again, watch your wiring. Don't pinch any wires under there. Make sure everything's out of the way. And you're going to just take your bolt, bolt down through, put your other bolt down through. Make sure you put your washer and a lock nut. Now a lock nut is made to go. If you look at the nut, you got kind of this ring around here, the nut part and then this ring. That goes to the ground. The ring goes down, so you want to screw the nut on like this. So it would be screwed onto the bolt like that is what you want to do. So you want to reach under there. Put your nut and your washer on. Put the other side on, and like I said, you may want to turn these bars a little bit. Don't forget you can do that. Turn those bars so that you can reach under here and get this in an easier spot for you to do it. Gets kind of hard with all the wiring and stuff under there. A lot of guys do this from underneath, and I don't really like that. It makes it too hard. And remember, you don't have to spin the nut to get it on. You can spin the bolt, the same thing. So if you can't reach under there to spin the nut, hold the nut and spin the bolt. Now again, I like to use a stubby wrench because it's easier to get in there. I need to get my socket. Now, just because I'm just by myself here, it's easier for me to use an impact gun. A lot of you guys don't have an impact gun. You don't have to do this. It's just easier for me. So get your wrench on underneath. And again, the stubby wrench, if you don't have one, it works great. And don't tighten it up all the way, just get it close. The wrench is kind of stuck in there. That's why I like the stubby wrench, because it's easier to work with. But it is, you can see how tight it fits in there. Alright, so we'll come back in a second once I unstick this. You don't need to watch me try to get this wrench unstuck here. Okay, so I got the wrench unstuck. So you want to do the same thing on this side. Now you get that one tight. Now go back and tighten the other one up. This one's real bare because all the wires. Okay, so that's basically all there is to that. Now this, you can see, is moving real easy. We actually have the wheel off on the front to do some other work. But that's basically all you have to putting everything back on. You're going to put your brake reservoir where you want it. The right wrench here. Okay, sorry about that. I had to get my wrench. I thought I had it sitting here. So what you want to do is a 5mm Allen. Just snug that up. And you don't want to get it all the way. You don't want to tighten it all the way, and I'll show you why here in a second. You want to leave that a little bit loose, because once you sit on the bike, you may want to tip this down, forwards, up higher, you know, whatever, you know, however you want to grab that. You can rotate this a little bit. So you don't want to put it in all the way super tight. So I just get it close so it kind of stays there, and then adjust it to where you want it, and then when you're done, then you can do the final tighten up on it. On this side, you're basically going to do the same thing. You're going to put this on. Put the bottom clamp. And again, on this side, like I said, it's easier to take this off because you can't slide that control on like you can on the other side. You have to do one or the other. And most guys are a little more nervous about the throttle side, so I say take this side apart because it's a little bit easier. But in my video on how to take everything off, I kind of changed a little bit and I showed you how to disassemble all these. You don't really have to do that. You can just do it the way we're doing it now. Save yourself a lot of time and a lot of trouble. And again, leave that just semi-tight so that you can swivel it where you want it. You're going to want to take the control housing, tighten those screws up. It's the same thing, don't tighten them up all the way, so you can kind of rotate this where you want. Now, a lot of guys that never had bars done before, inside there you'll see like a little tit coming down out of this housing. You have to grind that little tit off, because what that does, that kind of locks this in place. On aftermarket bars, you don't have that hole in the bar for that little tit to go in. So you got to just Dremel that little tit off, and then you can put this again wherever you want. So you may want it up, you may want it down. And the reason for that is now your hands are in a different spot. So you might want to just fine-tune how you adjust that stuff. So you would just, you know, once again, tighten this up just enough so it stays in place. When you get on it, you can set everything where you want and then snug it up. So that's basically all there is to putting the bars on. The next thing you're going to do is just connect up all your wires again. Put the wires on, put your center console on, put your gauge panel on, and you're basically done. The one thing you're going to notice is on these bars and most aftermarket bars, you cannot use the stock grips, okay? Reason being is if you look in the end here, the diameter inside here does not accept on Visions have the bolt-on end. It does not accept that, okay? So you can't put that in. You could drill it out and you can do some stuff and make it work, but most people change the grips out. So on the Vision bars, we don't make it that way because, like I say, most people change the grips out to like one of the Avon grips we offer. So when you put those on, you don't need those bar ends. So that's why we're not doing it in the video, because most people don't do it. And there really isn't a way to do it. There is companies that make bar ends that will go in there, and you can do that way. But as far as Witchdoctors, we don't offer it because most people don't ask for that. They want the other grips. So that's why. So let me get this wiring back together, and I'll come back and kind of show you the finished product. Okay, so we got all the wiring all snapped back on under here. The one thing you're going to want to make sure, and I guess I don't know if I said this earlier or not, is when you put your controls back on, you want to make sure you put the cables inside the handlebars. It's a lot of times when you put stuff back on, if you stick them on the outside, you'll see that when you go to turn, the cables will hit or it won't pull right. You won't be able to turn all the way. They'll get too tight. So you want to make sure as you put that stuff together that you turn the steering and make sure everything still steers right. So that's just a little tip. I wasn't sure if I told you or not. So you're just going to kind of get this back into place. Put your bolts back in. And just snug them down, don't crank them down super tight. If you feel like they're not going right, you may have some wires under there. So you want to make sure you don't have any wires stuck under there. And again, as you do that, kind of move this and make sure everything's going right. There's nothing too tight. Don't forget your little one down in here. Put your key thing back in. It just pops in. You're going to want to put your dash back on and make sure you line these 4 pins up. Sometimes this little metal clip on here will pop off and it'll stay in the fairing. So make sure all the clips are actually on here, because if you don't do that and you try to put it on, it won't go. Make sure you do that. That's basically everything. Make sure, once again, everything moves. And then pop your seat panel back down on. The last thing you're going to want to do is, if you want, you can take a zip tie and put a zip tie around your cables here. You know, keep them up out of the way nice. Wrap a zip tie around there. Get on it, set on it, adjust your controls where you want them. Like I said earlier, the level and how far and the angle and all that. Just make sure everything steers normal, nothing binds up, nothing hits, and that's all it is. This is a little bit more intimidating of a job. It's a little bit more work because you have so much wiring to deal with. But if you label the wiring and you take your time and you look at how everything goes, and again, take a picture with your cell phone if you need, it's not that big a job. It just takes some time, to have some patience, have a helper to help you do it, and you can get through it without a problem. Next video will show you is how to do the grips, but right now that's all it is for the handlebars. Thanks for watching.